from their Negroes. That's what Republicans want from their Negroes, to do what they're told. And a majority of white people voted for this. Oh, by the way, eggs are still more expensive. So you didn't even get that. Great job, white folks. Shit. Yeah. Shit. Shit. Yeah. Shit. He got himself involved in the shit. Oh, stock of them in the alley. Whoa, 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 whoa. You get it when we get the shit. The shit. You get it when we get the shit. The shit. The shit drugs. You get the drugs, then I get the money. Kill it. Get the shit. You'll be knee deep in the shit.
Here's about history. So, Elie Mystal on MSNBC finally got explicit today, calling out white Americans for destroying the country.
Fairly specifically this week, some have described it as a shock and awe campaign, which might be what it is. I guess the danger is in covering Trump 2.0, how do we deal with this? Because these things have real implications. Everything Joyce just described, people are affected by this. This is not an abstraction.
We tried to tell y'all. I mean, Ali, I wrote specifically about this issue, what he was going to do to the Department of Justice multiple times during the election cycle, because as you pointed out in your open, this was all written down. So I don't like the shock and awe version of this, because if you had been paying attention, they wrote it down. They told you exactly what they were going to do and exactly how you were going to do it. And a majority of white people voted for this. This is the disgusting version of America that people want. And oh, by the way, eggs are still more expensive. So you didn't even get that. Great job, white folks. Whoa. You get it when we get the shit. The shit. The shit drugs. You get the drugs, then I get the money. Kill that noise, man. Let's just get the shit. You'll get the shit. You'll be knee deep in the shit. Multiple times during the election cycle, because as you pointed out in your open, this was all written down. So I don't like the shock and awe version of this, because if you had been paying attention, they wrote it down. They told you exactly what they were going to do and exactly how you were going to do it. And a majority of white people voted for this. This is the disgusting version of America that people want. And oh, by the way, eggs are still more expensive. So you didn't even get that. Great job, white folks. In terms of how we cover it as a media or as a media group, right? We have to stop acting like any of these things have any basis in reality, right? Your earlier segment racist, about birthright citizenship is a perfect example of how you should cover it. There is no question about whether or not birthright citizenship is constitutional. It just is, right? There is no question about whether or not the Civil Rights Act should apply. It just does. And every time the media tries to sane wash Trump, whitewash Trump, explain Trump, defend Trump, what they're doing is muddying the waters on these issues that we have already decided, right? And I'm not saying that there's not a place for nuance. I actually wrote in The Nation about how if Trump wants to end DEI programs, that's legal. DEI is a policy. DEI is a policy invented by white folks who try to stop other white folks from being racist. If they want to end the policy, the next media question shouldn't be like, oh my God, you're ending DEI. The next media question should be, okay, so what are you doing to combat racism in employment and hiring? What are you doing to combat sexism in employment and hiring in the federal government, the largest employer in the country? Because if the answer is nothing, well, then that becomes illegal. Well, then that violates the Civil Rights Act. That violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the Equal Protection Clause. So the question has to be, fine, you want to end DEI? What's next, right? It's all like, you're going to repeal it. What are you going to replace it with? Because just going back to antebellum racism, that's what's illegal.
Okay.
You get it when we get the shit. The shit. Whoa. You get it when we get the shit. The shit. The shit drugs. You get the drugs, then I get the money.
To unpack there, but first I like how he's saying that the price of eggs has not come down even though Trump has been in office for 5 days. Trump's supposed to solve 4 years of inflation in 5 days. He really must think Trump's a superhero. Second of all, I find it hilarious that he thinks that ending DEI sends us back to the antebellum period, or that in some way not hiring based on merit alone is racism. But at least Elie Mystal is out there to defend all those race hucksters making over $400 $500,000 a year in DEI departments across several industries. Someone needs to be looking out for them now that their gravy train is ending. What would Elie Mystal think of the fact that currently Trump has a higher approval rating among black voters than white voters? According to a new poll conducted by Atlas Intel between January 21st and 23rd, 69% of black voters approve of Trump's job performance compared to only 50% of white voters. Meanwhile, 31% of black voters disapprove of Trump's job performance compared to 49% of white voters. But facts don't matter when you're this racist.
Yes, it's going to be a close election in Georgia because Walker has the backing of the Republicans. Now you ask, why are Republicans backing this man who's so clearly unintelligent, who so clearly doesn't have independent thoughts? But that's actually the reason. Walker's going to do what he's told. And that's what Republicans like. That's what Republicans want from their Negroes, to do what they're told. And Walker presents exactly as a person who lacks independent thoughts, lacks an independent agenda, lacks an independent ability to grasp policies, and he's just going to go in there and vote like Mitch McConnell tells him to vote. And remember, this has worked for the GOP in the South already. Tommy Tuberville, who right now is probably the dumbest person in the United States Senate, right? All he does is do what Mitch McConnell tells him to do. And so the GOP likes these candidates that aren't able to kind of think for themselves, because that means that it basically means that Mitch McConnell gets 3 votes every time he shows up to work, as opposed to just his own.
It only serves the Democrat narrative to erase non-white Trump voters and act as if they don't exist. What could possibly be more racist than pretending black and brown people don't exist simply because they don't hold the opinions that their woke representatives in the media think they should hold? Elie Mystal is here talking about party discipline and somehow racializes it as if a black candidate engaging in party discipline is somehow more racist than a white representative engaging in party discipline. Tommy Tuberville, his example, is white. And we've heard a lot about Trump shredding the Constitution, but this same guy, Elie Mystal, thinks that the Constitution is quote-unquote trash because it was written by white guys.
Folks, the law is complicated. I'm not going to lie about that. But it's not beyond the reach of most literate people. All right, it's not sending a rocket to Mars and making it land just so it doesn't right. You can read, you can understand the laws that govern this country, and you can understand how Republicans are obviously trying to manipulate those laws to take away the rights of minorities, women, the LGBTQ community. You can see it all, and I try to explain it all in ways that people can understand so that we can fight them.
I have to tell you, I loved this book so very much. The first chapter, canceling trash people is not a constitutional crisis. Chapter 9, the taking of black land, was another favorite of mine, and reverse racism is not a thing. I just think it's fantastic.
So, I live in Florida, so I'm like on ground zero of where all of this is happening. I'm out of my mind about the bills banning conversations about race and ethnicity and LGBTQ, just even mentioning gender identity in primary schools. But some will say, okay, so are you arguing for throwing out the Constitution? Should the Constitution be thrown out? What do we do? Is it a living document? Or is it a sacred document?
It's certainly not sacred. All right, let's start there. The Constitution is kind of trash. Now, let's just talk as adults for a second.
What did you say? It's what?
It's kind of trash.
Trash.
It was written by slavers and colonists and white people who were willing to make deals with slavers and colonists. They didn't ask anybody who looked like me what they thought about the Constitution. They didn't say, "Oh, Jim, come over here. What do you think about this old Constitution?" Well, massa, I sure don't like how you sell my children. But I gotta say, man, this King George, he needs to be stopped. My grandpapa used to say, "Ain't no taxation without representation for massa." Like, that's not what happened.
Okay.
Right? This document was written without the consent of black and brown people in this country and without the consent of women in this country. And I say if that is the starting point, the very least we can do is ignore what those slavers and colonists and misogynists thought and interpret the Constitution in a way that makes sense for our modern world. That's the starting line.
Do you want to rewrite it?
I could rewrite parts of it in a tweet, right?
So even Joy Behar is taken aback when she hears him say the Constitution is basically trash, before he arrogantly pretends that he could write a better Constitution because these old white guys are stupid. What this overpaid race huckster does not understand is that civil rights legends like Frederick Douglass, for instance, understood that all all of our founding documents, including the Constitution, including the Declaration of Independence, could be used and were used to free the slaves. The choice was between founding the nation or letting the slavery debate tear it apart before it even started. There is no protection for individual rights if you get rid of the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. is the only country founded on principles of universal freedom. Just because they weren't able to make good on that right away does not mean that those aren't our foundational principles. The U.S. is the beacon of freedom for the rest of the world and has been for a couple of centuries now. Only an absolute idiot would argue for tearing up the Constitution when it's literally the only reason why we were able to end slavery and extend the franchise to women. The truth is that Trump only won in 2024 because of historic gains among non-white voters. This is what race hucksters like Elie Mystal don't want people to understand. Even the New York Times admits that Trump made historic gains among non-white voters, while still putting it in their same old race-baiting terms. Trump spreads his politics of grievance to non-white voters. How is that not explicit racism to imagine that non-white voters would also not like crime and high prices? Who else is being erased? Not just Hispanic and Black voters who supported Trump. It's also Asian Americans. Many Asian Americans from Vietnam, China, etc. supported Trump because they have experience living under communism, while many Democrat voting activists openly support communism, regardless of whether they understand it. Maybe these Elie Mystal race hucksters are freaking out because even CNN is acknowledging Trump's huge surge in popularity.
Look here. Back in January 2017, Donald Trump became the first president in history to start his presidency with a net negative approval rating. Look at where we are now in January 2025. Considerably better at plus 6 points. That's up 9 points. To borrow a Donald Trump phrase, this is big league. This is a sign that the American people, at least initially, like what they're seeing. And so you see right here, more Americans approve of Donald Trump's job than disapprove. And that is very much unlike what we saw 8 years ago.
So this is a moment when Americans are actually coming together. Trump making historic gains among non-white voters should finally put this white rage narrative to rest, especially since many white liberals have realized that there is no placating these racist media types who knowingly push divisive rhetoric to enable the Democrats to divide and conquer the electorate. If you're a white liberal and you've been groveling for forgiveness from race hucksters today, well, in the words of Scott Jennings, it'll never be enough for the woke mob.
Whoa. You get it when we get the shit. The shit. The shit. Drugs. You get the drugs, then I get the money. Get the shit. You'll be knee deep in the shit.